right now. So, thank you everybody for coming. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Uh, as I mentioned earlier, today we're going to be talking about substitute teaching in Montreal, and you're going to get to see here a little bit if I can get the arrows to work, the agenda of our presentation. So, we're going to start with a little portrait of your job search here in Quebec, education Quebec, different hiring timelines, and talk. And then later on, we're going to go to specific school board information. Okay. So that's when we're going to be hearing from some of our guests. And at the end of the presentation, there will be time for a Q&A where you can ask your questions. I know we have some questions that have already been received that are going to be a part of the presentation as well. But please do not be afraid to put your questions in the chat, to raise your hand. Myself and our guests are more than happy to answer questions for you. So you can see here a portrait of education in Quebec, the different kinds of schools that are available. Some of you, if you've been in some classes that I've visited or if you attended other presentations, you might have seen this slide. But if you haven't, you can see here some of the different schools. So with English school boards, with English schools, we have a difference between public schools and privates and the QAIS schools, which is Quebec Association of Independent Schools. For the public school boards, you apply to their central HR to obtain an employee profile and then get access to substitute teaching contracts. So maybe some of you were present at some of those hiring evenings in March, right? So maybe some of you already had some interviews, but generally you apply to the central HR in order to get access to all the schools in that school board. With some of the private schools, it works a little bit differently. You might need to apply to each school separately. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't check the QAIS website for job postings. Sometimes the job postings still might be centralized to some degree, but you generally will be applying to each school directly and probably applying over email directly to the head of that school that you're interested in. Now, for French schools, it works pretty similar. You have the Centre de Services Scolaires and the FEEP, which is Fédération des Établissements d'Enseignement Privé. Similar thing. For the Centre de Services Scolaires, you're going to apply directly to their central HR. And for the FEEP, you're going to check the FEEP website for job postings, but generally apply to each school. Indigenous schools fall between both of them. Some schools are fully independent, so you would just apply to them directly or to their school boards like Katowice or to the different education centers within Indigenous communities. Other Indigenous schools might actually be part of a different school board. So for some of you maybe who applied for the Central Quebec School Board, they have the Jimmy Sandy Memorial High School, who has visited the Faculty of Education many times. And that is an Indigenous school in an Indigenous community, but it's part of the Central Quebec School Board. You can see here there are 9 Anglophone school boards in Quebec. Obviously, some of you are very, I'm sure, familiar with the EMSB and Lester B. Pearson School Board, but you also have Sir-Wilfrid Laurier, Riverside, New Frontiers, Western Quebec, Central Quebec, Eastern Shores, and the Eastern Township School Board. And for Francophone school boards, obviously, there's more of them than English school boards. You have over 60 Francophone Centres Services Scolaires, with 3 serving the Montreal region. The Centre Service Scolaire de Montréal, which is sort of in the middle of the island, the center of Montreal. The Centre Service Scolaire Marguerite Bourgeois, which is the West Island. And the Centre Service Scolaire de la Pointe de l'Île, which is where it sounds like the point of the island, the east end of Montreal. As we mentioned here, we have different private schools. So there's the QAIS, the Quebec Association of Independent Schools, which has 24 English schools in the Montreal region, mostly with some exceptions. So obviously, for those of you who attended the QAIS Speed Networking event, pretty much all the schools were in Montreal except for one, which was Stansted College, which is right by the border. As I mentioned, there's the Fédération des établissements d'enseignement privé, which has 193 schools. And then there's the CAIS, Canadian Accredited Independent Schools, which has about 90 schools across Canada. So you may be wondering what the compensation is like for substitute teachers, and you can see it laid out here pretty clearly. So as of the 141st workday of the 25-25, I don't know what's going on with my elocution today, but if you can bear with me, as of the 141st workday of the 2025 to 2026 school year, you can see here that the base hourly rate for a non-legally qualified substitute teacher is $54.11, whereas for a legally qualified teacher, it's $63.14. And this is from the CPNCA collective agreement, page 122. You can click on it here. Honestly, for a lot of the questions that you guys might have, those collective agreements are really going to be your best friend in finding answers. They're very, 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 very long documents, but they typically have all the answers that you're looking for. Maybe not in the most easy to digest format, but they have all the answers. So a lot of times, if you have a question and you obviously can reach out to myself, to me as well, but you can also take a look in the collective agreements to see the answer to your question. So what is the typical hiring timeline for teachers in Quebec? February, there's the McGill Education Career Fair. I think some of you I know were there. Some of you maybe this next year will be your first time attending, but that is a great event. This past year, we had 53 different school boards from Quebec, Canada, and even international. And this is a good time to start submitting applications. March and April is really the busy period. So that's when a lot of the public school boards have their recruitment events. So you have recruitment events for EMSB, Lester B, New Frontiers. So that's in March and April is when you start having a really, really busy season of interviewing. And sometimes it keeps going into May and June. Obviously, now it starts to slow down a bit, but you can still keep an eye on school websites. You can still apply to positions. And particularly with private schools, sometimes they operate on a different timeline. So you can keep checking their websites as well. And you can check Apply to Education's virtual job fairs. Some of you, I think, maybe attended the job fair on May 2nd for Quebec English school boards. So yes, a lot of this stuff happens in March and April, but there still is some degree of movement that happens throughout the rest of the beginning of the year. Then in August, there's last minute hiring. So yes, schools typically have everybody that they need, but sometimes things happen. Someone says, oh my God, there's an emergency. I can't teach this year. I need someone to fill in for me. So there might be some last minute hiring, scrambling to fill up some vacancies. So it's a good time to reconnect with your network. It's a good time to even, and I know this sounds like boomer advice. I know this sounds like something that your father would tell you and you would just blow him off, but it can sometimes be a good idea to even show up in person with your resume and try to talk to the person who's at the reception. It does make a difference. Basically, no one does it anymore. So it really will make you stand out. And it's a great way to be more than just another CV in a pile of 100 CVs. And honestly, I'm being pretty generous with 100. I'm sure it's a lot more than that, as some of our guests might be able to tell you. So in order to take action, what should you be doing? You should check school board websites regularly and apply regularly to postings. You can also send cold applications. So I know, for example, I'm just going to use EMSB as an example, teaching at EMSB. Yes, it is an email that you use to apply to jobs, but they also accept applications when there aren't jobs, just say, look, I'm really interested in teaching in your school board. So just because you don't see jobs right now, don't get discouraged. You can still send a cold application. And that way, the person who read your email first might recognize you when they're doing their next round of hiring for jobs. Not to say they'll reach out instantly to you, you should still apply to a job, even if you've already sent a cold application to that same email. But if you've sent a cold application, once you apply to a job, once it's open, they might recognize you. And yeah, like it says here, don't forget to follow up. So sometimes you might not hear back in 3 weeks. It doesn't hurt to say, hey, I just wanted to follow up on this. As I mentioned before, I'm really eager to work in your school board, and I saw that you're actually accepting a role for a teacher of history, right? You can also contact employers to see if they're hiring, so you can contact principals, right? It's great to contact HR personnel, but sometimes it is principals, administrators are the people who are creating the roles, who know exactly how much people they need, and then they're going to HR to publish the role, right? So sometimes it's helpful to think, okay, who's the person who actually is in the position to create a job, right? And it can be helpful to contact those people. Not to say that you're going to contact a principal and they're going to immediately say, we're going to create a whole new position for you, but it can't hurt, right? It's good to have that kind of recognition. It's good to have that kind of network. And like I said, network with schools in your area, network with people in the field, stay in touch with your CT from your field experience and your internships, stay in touch with supervisors, principals, and another person who's really useful to have a good relationship with, receptionist, administrative people. Those are the people who are going to be making the phone calls when they need a sub. So one of the best pieces of advice that people are probably going to give you throughout your career, for those of you who are starting out, or I meant to say throughout your degree, is to become friendly with the secretary, right? Become friendly with the receptionist because that's the person who makes the call when they actually need someone to fill a spot, to fill a vacancy very quickly, right? And I know some of you probably are afraid of the word networking, right? You probably think that networking is something that's done by people in suits wearing a gallon of hair gel on their head at the Cathcart on Thursdays, right? But it doesn't have to be just that. Networking really is just making connections with people in a way that's beneficial for your career. So, one of the most useful examples of networking that I can honestly give you, when you have your field experiences, when you have your internships, eating your lunch in the break room, eating your lunch with your coworkers as opposed to just eating in your car or in your classroom, right? Go where people are, talk with them, because then when you leave their school, you're not going to be just one out of a million different student teachers they've had, but you're going to be like, oh, right. Um, Angela, I remember her. She was really friendly. I really liked her. She's the one who was into knitting, right? So this is a good way. That's honestly an example of networking. It doesn't necessarily need to be more complicated than that. It doesn't need to look like Mad Men or Succession or any of those shows. It really can just be having that conversation. Okay? And you can also set up career conversations to expand your network. So you can reach out to HR personnel, you can reach out to principals, even when they're not hiring, and just say, I'd love to talk more about what it's like to work in your school, right? Don't necessarily take the lack of a job posting as if it just ends there. Even if there's a school you really want to work in and you reach out to the principal and they say, sorry, we're not hiring, right? You can still say, oh, well, I'd really love the chance to talk with you for 20 minutes to know a bit more about your school. What's your educational philosophy? What's it like working here, right? Because then you get useful information that you can use later. Okay. So apart from that, just get involved, get your foot in the door, especially with your field experiences. It's a great idea to get involved in after school clubs. It's a great idea to tutor with different school boards, to be involved in various different extracurriculars. Just an example, I mean, for me, I know when I was in high school, I know you guys aren't in high school, but it's just the examples from when I was in high school, so bear with me. I taught guitar at the elementary school that I had attended, right? Um, so you can be involved in various different extracurriculars. You could work as a teacher's assistant. You can volunteer. There's a lot of different ways to get involved. And subbing, which we're going to be discussing today, is another great way to get involved. Okay, so try to look for opportunities to get closer to the people who can help you along in your career. Try to look for opportunities that are going to help you to gain experience, to gain knowledge, so that you can be the best educator that you can be, and so that you can be recognized as a strong educator, as a strong applicant when you're applying to sub, when you're applying for teaching positions. And you might notice those little logos at the bottom. Uh, that is for the Education Career Update newsletter. So usually I do a show of hands when I'm in a physical classroom to ask how many people read the Education Career Update newsletter. And it's always abysmal, right? I'm always disappointed. So guys, please read the newsletter. You receive it every 2 weeks. You received one last Thursday and you'll be receiving one next Thursday. Um, Please read the Education Career Update newsletter. A lot of schools send us job postings that we put directly into the newsletter. Same thing with the McGill ISA Instagram, right? We post a lot of job postings on there in addition to upcoming events, conferences, useful information. So take a look at those things. And let family and friends know that you're looking. Education's a smaller community than you might think. So if you go to a party or it's summer, if you're at a barbecue and you're talking with someone and the conversation drifts to what do you study or what do you do for work, uh, you might say like, oh, well, I'm actually in my third year of my B.Ed, so I'm looking to be a teacher right now. I'm just looking for some substitute opportunities, or right now I'm actually an actuary, but I'm in an MATL program and I'm pivoting to teaching, so I'm kind of looking for opportunities to work in schools and do some substituting, right? Now, application. So I'm going to pass it off to our guests. Who we have from the EMSB New Frontiers, from the EMSB English Montreal School Board, New Frontiers School Board, and Lester B. Pearson School Board. And we're going to talk about the EMSB. So I'm going to pass it off to Niki.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Angus, for offering us this opportunity to meet with the students from your program. What you just mentioned earlier before, you just pinned it, definitely. Networking is extremely important, and use those resources to your advantage, most definitely. Okay, so I will be discussing our application process here at the EMSB. It's very simple. We will certainly welcome your applications. We have a specific email address for teachers. It's teaching@emsb.qc.ca. Now, our first priority is always given to legally qualified teachers. So what does that mean? Obviously, once you have completed your Bachelor's of Education or MATL with a brevet, or your brevet is pretty much on its way, you will be granted an interview. For the most part, our interviews for the teachers are in March. Our big, what we call recruitment session, our blitz is in March. However, just like Angus said, we interview throughout as our needs progress. We may have hired a certain teacher for a specific assignment, but let's just say something happens, they go on some sort of leave of absence, we need to replenish. So we are certainly interviewing all the way up at least until August, and then some, if I can say that. Then second priority is given to non-legally qualified teachers. What is that? That's somebody who holds a bachelor's degree in a teachable subject. You will be granted an interview. However, like I said, first priority is always given to legally qualified teachers. Now, you may be saying, I'm a student teacher, I'm in my FE3 or my FE4, but I want to substitute teach. I'm ready. I want to substitute teach. Well, this is the process for us. You have to approach your school principal where you're doing your field placement, contact the principal and say, look, I'm really interested in performing substitute teaching for you. How can I go about doing this? They will contact our assistant director in human resources. They will have a discussion. They will share your CV. They will get the recommendation from the principal, and you will be exceptionally granted a substitution card for that particular school. Let me move on to the next slide. Sorry, it's just taking a little bit slower. There you go. Perfect. Oh, sorry, we went too
Oh,
far.
sorry. There you go.
Okay, so when it comes to our actual interview process, like I said, you must complete the interview. You have to go through the interview in your graduating year. Usually we have these sessions in March, but like I said, we have them continuously throughout the year. And then once you are successful, we have you complete an employee package, an employee kit. Sorry, we're a little bit old school. We're not as up to it with as Lester B is or New Frontiers. I know you guys have a nice program that you use, but unfortunately we're a little bit old school. So you have to come in, fill out an employee kit, give us your documents, and then afterwards you'll be issued your electronic teacher substitution card. That will give you access to all of our schools once you have completed your studies. And I think that pretty much brings us to the end. So I just also want to say congratulations to the graduates. And we definitely look forward to your future contributions. Oh,
Thank you,
Angus, we
Nikki.
can't, yeah.
So,
I'll mute myself and I'll move
yeah,
it over
sorry.
to Clarisse.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Clarisse Acho Tinda, and I'm with Lester B. Pearson School Board. And it is my pleasure, as always, to be here and speak a little bit about the LBPSB. And so, in general, what are requirements to be able to substitute? Preference is always going to be given to someone that is legally qualified. So that means the person has a brevet or they have a permis from the Ministry of Education. We would also consider right now, this started last year, candidates who have completed your B.Ed, right? Oh, sorry, candidates have completed your B.Ed or MATL with the brevet pending. So if you're at the end of your program, you haven't received your brevet yet, we would consider that you're almost legally qualified. We would accept you as well. As of last year, we started accepting fourth year B.Ed students. So if you've completed your third field experience and you're in your fourth year, you're graduating here, then we are able to allow you to substitute with us as well. You must though complete an interview with us in order to be able to do that. And then MATO students. For MATO students, ideally, it would be after your first field experience. Now, exceptionally, we can take people before the first field experience, but for MATO students, we like them ideally to have had a first field experience, have a feel for the classroom and how things work, and you can start subbing with us at that point. And please note as well that being able to teach in French for us is always an asset, as is all the other school boards. So always indicate it on your CV if you're able to teach or you're able to sub in French. But I will also indicate, please, when you're making your CVs, make sure you indicate what your category is. So don't just put a bachelor's in education. Tell us whether it's in English or what's your teaching category. Is it math or you're doing an MATL in social sciences or in science? Always make sure you specify because we come across quite a lot of students and I'm not sure what is it that what is your teaching category is. Now, I'm moving on to the next slide. Just hold on a moment. It's just a little bit slow, but it will come up. Okay, we're there. So for emergency substitute teachers, so exceptionally, third year B.Ed students on your field experience or doing their practicums at Lester B. Pearson, we may consider you for emergency substitution at the school in which you were doing your field experience upon the special recommendation by the school principal. So it means that the school principal would interview you. They'll probably have a recommendation as well from your CT, and then they will be able to let you sub, but you can emergency sub only at that school. You will not have access to Scolago, which is our absence and replacement platform where substitution takes place. You're only subbing at a particular school. As an emergency sub as well, you can do up to 3 schools at a maximum, but it means that for each school, you will need to have an interview separately with a principal. So if you're subbing in one school and you wanted to sub in another school, you will need to have an interview with the school principal of the other school. And please note that being an emergency sub does not make you a full status substitute teacher. So you don't have access to all the schools in the board. You only have access to the school in which you have been accepted, the school where you were doing your field placement. And so how do you generally become a substitute teacher on Scolago with us? The first option is that we've already mentioned in the previous slide. If you're legally qualified, you can apply online. So all applications take place online. I probably always have a substitute teacher job that's open all year round. So you can pretty much apply at any time. Okay. So for 4th year B.Ed and MATL students, if you're doing your field experience, we typically would recommend, and the principal knows this, that you have your interview with the principal of the school where you are. All right. So you do not need to come to our annual spring recruitment session if you've already been interviewed by the principal. Sorry, my son is just right here. And then the second option is that you're applying online and you're getting interviewed by HR. So you can apply online directly on the website. Like I said, go to the LBPSB website and then join our team. And there's a section for you to apply. We also have our annual spring recruitment interviews that take place in March or April of each year. And we typically advertise these with the schools. When we come to McGill, we advertise this. So we ask you as well, you can apply online. So I have quite a few students who are doing their full field experience who also apply. We usually cross-check with the schools. And if we see that someone is doing their full field experience, instead of having them come for the annual spring recruitment interviews, we would just notify your principal to make sure that they interview you at the end of your field experience, and that counts as well. And right after the annual spring recruitment interviews as well, we'll typically do an information day. I think this year, for those who have been interviewed by us, I don't know if you're here, but it will be happening on June 8th as well. So I will send out some information about that. But we tend to have an annual kind of like an information evening where we can provide you more information about how to navigate our school board. And so if you're approved for hire to be a substitute board-wide, not as an emergency substitute, but as an emergency as a substitute for the entire board, we would send you an employee kit. You would need to bring it in person back to us. Niki, we still do it. They need to come back to the office so that we can verify your IDs and everything. And then you would be authorized to go on Scolago and we'll be able to activate your account at that point. So basically, kind of like those are the ways in which you can substitute with us. I'll pass it over
Thank
to
you,
you, Kim.
Clarisse.
Yeah, thank you, Angus.
Oh, it's we have Sir Wilfrid Laurier School Board
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's true.
So yeah, both very excited to hear from Kim, certainly. So now we're going to talk a bit about the Sir Wilfrid Laurier School Board, which for those of you who maybe don't know, that's the school board for Laval and the North Shore English School Board. So you can see, similar to the others, the Sir Wilfrid Laurier School Board does prioritize legally qualified teachers to be added to the substitution list, with exceptions, right? So for example, the HR representatives state that all B.Ed students who are currently in the 3rd or 4th year of their B.Ed with minimum 60 credits completed can apply for substitute teaching opportunities. So you can see here it does vary school board to school board, and sometimes in school boards off the island, there might be a little more wiggle room in terms of what opportunities you can apply for. Obviously, off the island, for those of you who live in Montreal or who live on the island of Montreal, sometimes it can pose difficulties, but if you have a car especially, it might not be as far as you think. And even if you don't, it's still worth checking out. I mean, Laval, obviously, there might be some schools that are close to the Orange Line. South Shore, there might be some schools that are close to the REM, right? So it still is worth looking into just to kind of maximize the amount of opportunities that you might have. So in order to apply, you can send your CV to HR new hire at swlauriersb.qc.ca or apply through the Atlas portal for substitute teachers. If you meet the criteria, you'll be sent a list of documents required to open your file. And once those documents have been received by the school board, you'll receive access to Scalago. So it's a pretty similar process to what we see with Lester B. Pearson, with the exception that maybe there's some other that if you're in your year 3 or year 4, you can actually just apply to be a full substitute teacher, which is exciting. Riverside School Board, which is on the South Shore, you can submit a substitute teacher application online through the application portal on Workland Atlas. And our RSB, similar to what we just saw with Sir Wilfrid Laurier School Board, it welcomes MATL and U3, U4 B.Ed students to apply to do substitute teaching. So if you completed your internship or your field experience in the school board, you might not be required to do an interview for substitution, but you might need to get a reference from the school principal. Okay, so anybody who is interested in applying, you're encouraged to visit their jobs website. So we can see here that sometimes there's other school boards that aren't located on the island of Montreal, but that might make it a bit easier for you to start substitute teaching right away, which is not a bad thing. You know, it's if you feel ready if you feel ready to substitute teach, it's a good piece of advice to do it, because then by the time you're done with your program, you're going to have more work experience under your belt and you're going to stand out more from other applicants when it comes to looking for a full-time teaching contract. And, you know, even if you kind of don't feel like you're ready, you know, it still is worth trying out. Sometimes you find out how ready you are for things by doing them, right? And sometimes you might have some bad days, you might have some poorly behaved classrooms, but even if it goes poorly one day, that just those poor days, they decrease the possibility of future poor teaching days in the future. Or maybe not, but maybe you get used to kind of the downsides. You get used to the badly behaved classrooms and you learn to roll with the punches, which I think is important in the profession that you guys are going into. But anyway, I'm gonna not start rambling. I started rambling a little while ago. I'm going to stop rambling and I'm gonna pass it off to Kim to tell us about the New Frontier School Board.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Porter. I'm the recruiter for the New Frontier School Board. We have, because we're on the South Shore and we have a very, very rural community, we do have, as Niki said, we have different rules. All of us, we use different softwares. It's a little bit, I admit, easier to sub for us in our rural communities. We allow for first and second year students to join on Scalago, to become substitute teachers on the days you don't have class. So for us, what we do prioritize teachers with licenses, and we do prioritize university students. So saying that, we use a platform called Scalago. We allow you to apply online, and we do our interviews both in person and on Teams. I'm sorry, I'm not very articulate today. So what you can do is you can submit your CV through the website, or you can actually choose us on Scalago and we will get a notification. So if you have Scalago for another school board, you just add our establishment and we get a notification and we would set up the interview for you. We do have a very old system for the employee kit. We do allow you to scan it back. It's not done online. However, once it's done once, it's done forever. Then we will update your Scalago saying that you are active and good to go. One good thing about Scalago is that you can put in your own calendar and you will only get notifications on the days that you are available. We are big believers in making sure that your Scalago is up to date. So once, I know that number 2 says you have to have at least 30 credits. What we ask for is that you have your first field experience done. And if your teacher says it went well, then we're more than happy for you to join our subbing lists. Did that move? Do I have a second slide?
No, just
Okay,
just
I'll go
that
back
one.
then. Okay, so so for the New Frontiers, our territory runs from Chateauguay, which is only about 25 minutes from downtown. We have many students that come from the West Island, from downtown, from Brossard. It's easily accessible from the Mercier Bridge, the Champlain Bridge, and the 30. It is surprising how easy it is to get to most of our schools from the 30. We encourage everybody, especially during the nice months, to give all our schools a try. We have an 8-room schoolhouse in Franklin, Quebec, that's next to an apple orchard. And then we have a very inner city high school in Chateauguay. We have all different types of opportunities for you. And if you happen to be in the MATL program and you are looking for a part-time teaching job during the school year, we would ask that you clearly indicate that when you apply to us. We have had a couple of students this year who are doing the MATL, taking on part-time contracts, 50%, 40%, even a 20%, 1 day a week for the whole year, guaranteed. So if you are interested in something like that, please feel free to reach out. If you're interested in doing a stage with us, as with all the boards, you can reach out. We enjoy having you in our schools. It helps us see you and you see us. If you have an interest in being in a particular subject or grade level, we can look at that and see the subbing opportunities for you there specifically. Scalago allows us to monitor and to pick the subjects and the grade level. So if you're only comfortable in grades 1 and 2 for the moment, you just have access to those. It's very interesting what we can help you grow your skill set. So anyway, so if you're interested in us, the information is all there. Like with Niki and with Clarisse, we have it. We also show up at the university from time to time with little pop-ups, and you can come by and see us. And I think Angus will put our email addresses at the end, and you can directly, send us. Oh, my email's there. Sorry. Our emails are there, and you can send us an email and just ask away, ask your questions. So give us a call, and our door is always open. Thank you, Angus.
You're welcome. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the French schools. So you can see here, everything's linked to how to apply to the French schools. For subbing, it works pretty similar to the English school boards, as Scalago is still used in a lot of cases. And you might be wondering, do I need to pass a French exam to sub in French schools? We can see here that no, not necessarily. You can start subbing before passing your French exam. There might be different requirements in different cases. You can see for the Centre Service Scolaire Marguerite Bourgeois, you need to succeed you need to pass a French exam within your first year of your contract, but it's not necessarily the case that you need it before you start subbing. So if you're comfortable teaching in French, you still can look into those school boards as well. And it's recommended to do because it just increases the amount of opportunities that are available to you. You can also look into subbing in independent schools. So you can send your CV to the head of school or HR by clicking on the full list of QAIS schools. And you could do the same thing with the Fédération des établissements d'enseignement privé. Okay? So you can check the QAS careers or Emploi FEP website for up-to-date information on their hiring needs. With them, as we mentioned, it is a bit more school to school. There's no central HR, so you would just be doing it on that basis, but the job postings still are relatively centralized. Now, some additional information and resources here. You can review the substitute teaching policy concerning McGill teaching placements and internships. So you can see here the link to McGill teacher candidates acting as substitute teachers. You can email placements.education@mcgill.ca, and you can watch the YouTube video of our presentation with Kim, Niki, and Clarisse back in January on navigating the recruitment process. So it's linked there. That one, if you Google it on YouTube, you won't find it. I put that one as unlisted because I think there was one point where the student's camera was on and it wasn't clipped, so I didn't want to put that publicly. But if you click on that as McGill students, you have access to it. So you can also obtain up-to-date information using various Facebook groups. So the Quebec Teachers Facebook group, the EMSB Substitute Teachers Facebook group, the Lester B. Pearson School Board Substitute Teachers Facebook group are all good resources for you. Honestly, a lot of those online communities are just in general very useful. There's also the Canadian Teachers subreddit. So anything you can do to kind of get talking to other teachers can really, really help to demystify some of the process for you and help answer some of those questions. So we have some questions received in advance, but I'm going to just open up the floor because you guys have been sitting there very patiently and see, is there anybody who had a question that they wanted to ask right now that you want to put in the chat or raise your hand? Are there any questions? When applying for a substitute position in any of the school boards, should we use our McGill email or our personal? Um, I'm gonna say it doesn't really matter. I think I know that when I was a student, I used my McGill email because I thought that it looked more professional, but it can help to use your McGill email. It certainly might help, especially if you met someone at a job fair that they remember that you're a McGill student. And the good thing about using your McGill email is that once you graduate, you actually have access to your McGill email for the rest of your life. So I was a McGill student. I graduated in 2018. I still have my McGill email. So it really is up to you. I don't see it making a big difference. The one thing I will say is if you start working at a school board, if you start subbing, and then let's say you start subbing at the Lester B. Pearson School Board, and you want to apply to other jobs at that school board, you might think it's a good idea to use your school board email. However, that email is tied to your contract, so you won't have it once that contract finishes necessarily. You won't have access to it. So even if you're applying to a school board that you currently work at, it's a good idea to use your McGill or personal email just because you make sure that if someone replies to you, they're replying to an email that's still going to be active. I don't know if our guests have anything else to say about that, to say about that. Um, but we have a second question. If I understood, for this one's for you, Clarisse. If I understood correctly, to be an emergency sub for Lester B. Pearson specifically, you can only work for 3 schools and you do not have access to Scalago. Yes, I believe that's correct, but I'll let Clarisse answer that one. Oh, oh, Clarisse, you're muted. Huh. You're still, huh.
My headphones. Okay, sorry. I'm not sure. I kept unmuting and I realized it wasn't, but it works on the headphones. So, Elizabeth, in answer to your question, so in order to be an emergency substitute, you have to be a third year student on your field placement, and it is at the recommendation of the principal of the school where you're doing your field placement. So you can work in a maximum of up to 3 schools. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you work in 3 schools. You can work in a maximum of up to 3 schools, but you do not have access to Scolago. So the emergency subs typically would replace for your CTs. Most of the time, that's what they're doing, and then sometimes if there's other work in the school, and then they could also be assigned that, and it also has to be in agreement with your with the McGill your education coordinator as well. They also we also make them aware they have to agree to it for you to be an emergency sub. But you do not go on Scolago as an emergency sub at all. So if you've finished your third year and you've gone into your fourth year, you can do an interview with HR at the start of your fourth year, and then If you pass an interview, then we can let you be on Scolago, and then you have access to all of the schools where you can substitute within.
Thank you. Thank you, Clarisse. Do we have any other questions from the chat? Anybody else would like to ask a question? Okay, well, if not, we have some questions that were received in advance, which you can see on the screen. Some of these, I'm going to go and answer some of these. Some of them, I think we've already kind of covered, like when and how students can apply for the sub card. We can see the procedure for all the different school boards in Montreal in the slides, as well as the allowances for subbing after your third field experience. I think we covered that for all the schools, as well as Scolago. For EETC, do I need to finish my EETC before applying for sub jobs? I would say, and our guest can correct if I'm wrong on this, generally, technically, no, you do need that in order to get your brevet. But to apply for sub jobs, you don't necessarily need to finish that. It certainly won't hurt, and it's something you can add to your resume. But for a sub, it's a bit different than being a licensed teacher, so you don't necessarily need that. But realistically, I mean, you guys do that quite early on into your degree. You do it quite early on to your degree. So by the time you're eligible to sub in a lot of different institutions, you'll probably have that under your belt already. And then as far as taking a French exam, quite a similar answer. You don't necessarily need it right away. It certainly can't hurt. And we saw, for example, with the CSSMB that within a year, you would need to complete a French exam. And I can put a link in the chat later. We had a presentation that I led with Kim back in the fall on French exams in your teaching career, where we covered the different French exams. So you can see what's required for the different school boards. I'm curious, actually, I mean, I want to make sure that this tracks our guests. So for example, for you guys with immersion, do you guys require that substitute teachers have their French exams completed, or is it okay if they just prove to you in an interview that they have a sufficient level of French?
I can go first. So they do not have to have the French exam completed. Typically, at interviews, we would ask them questions in French just to make sure they're able to teach in French. If you do obtain a French contract, though, you have up to 2 years in order for that position to become yours, a permanent role. You have up to 2 years. It used to be one, now it's been increased to two, up to 2 years to complete the French exam and pass it in order for the position to be yours. But I would say, though, I encourage students, the ones that I have met, that if you're able to do your French exam before you graduate, please do it. I do know 1 or 2 students that have been able to walk into literally the first year, walk into a tenure track position because they had your French test and everything was ready, and there were vacancies. So if you're able to do it, yes, but it is not an absolute requirement. You have up to 2 years if you obtain a French contract to be able to demonstrate that you have the appropriate French test.
We are the same. Like if you can do the French exam before you graduate, all the more power to you.
Yeah.
You will probably walk into a vacant French job, a tenure track vacant French job. At New Frontiers, we do have an in-house French exam that we use. We realize that, the new generation is very, very bilingual. And if you if you are in that situation and you feel that you could write the exam just like that, we would give you the in-house exam. It's done online. And if you were to receive certain marks, it allows you to teach within certain cycles. But yes, if you feel you are qualified and ready to write the CIFRA, do it. Do it as soon as you can. It will also allow you to work within French boards. But for us, it's a little bit different. We have an in-house French exam as we are a little bit smaller.
And if I might add to that, when it comes to EMSB, in essence, to work as a substitute teacher, you do not necessarily need to have it, but you also need to be responsible enough on your own and not take a French class if you know to teach a French class if you know that you're not able to teach that French class as well. When it comes to offering you contracts, that's when we go by whatever is written on your brevet. It'll indicate if you're able to teach the subject matter, let's say in English or in French. I'll give you a perfect example. If you want to teach bilingual, we will accept the CFRAN or the CEL. But then afterwards, you have to do an in-house test similar to what Kim mentioned. You have to go through an interview process, and then there's a written component as well for us to say, okay, even though you do have that paper in your hand, we from HR have qualified you to teach a bilingual position. Also, the DELF, we accept that if you're, let's say, I don't know, let me give you a perfect example. If you want to teach, let's say, mathematics in French. So it's to teach a subject matter in French. We accept the DELF. Once again, you have to go through a little bit of a process with HR for us to deem you qualified if it does not say that on your brevet.
Thank you, Niki. If there's no other questions in the chat, you guys can put questions in the chat or raise your hand at any time. I'm going to move on to the next one, which is, are substitute teachers required to remove their religious symbols due to Bill 21? The answer is yes. I know there are efforts underway to challenge this law, but for a public school, that is the answer. If that is your situation, then it might be worth looking into private schools. We had an information session back in February with Terry Davies, who's the head of QAIS, and Patricia Briand, who's the head of school at Sacred Heart, which is a Catholic school. And she strongly encouraged students who are in this situation to apply. You might think that, well, I'm not going to apply to a Catholic school if that's not my religion, if I'm not Catholic. But the way she put it, a lot of these schools, for example, her school, yes, it's a Catholic school, but there's students of all faiths and teachers of all faiths at that school. So that is the law. We're going to see what happens with that. But if you're in that situation, there are still opportunities at private schools as well. I don't know if our guests have anything to add.
Sure, I'd love to add to that. So the EMSB has definitely publicly declared that we don't agree with Bill 21, with the prohibition of wearing religious symbols, but we don't have a choice. It's the law. We need to abide by the law. With that being said, you may see some employees that are wearing religious symbols. Keep in mind, they were grandfathered. So anybody hired before March 2019 is grandfathered. So anybody new coming in is not permitted to wear religious symbols. But I'm saying that because you might come into one of our schools and say, hey, I saw a teacher wearing a religious symbol. It's not fair. Why can't I? Well, at least you know now that there is a grandfather clause to that.
Oh,
That's
that's
pretty
a really
much.
good point, Niki. We have the same issue. We've had people say to us, well, so and so is wearing, and they've been here for 15 years and they have the legal right to wear it. So even though, as Niki said, we disagree completely with this law, we have to abide by it. It is a law. But we do have people in our schools that are grandfathered.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. So next question, can we talk about the recruitment process for first year teaching? I think we covered that earlier on. Would it be possible to substitute teach even for part of a day if we have classes every single day? To my knowledge, yes, this is possible. A lot of times substitute teaching is done by schedule block. So that is possible. I'll let our guests highlight that based on examples from their career. But yes, to my knowledge, this is doable.
Yes.
Go ahead, Niki. Sorry, go
No,
ahead.
yes, absolutely. We offer, let's say, half a day or a full day, obviously. But if it's for a short period, like let's just say now it's only for, let's say, an hour that we need to replace, we might not necessarily call in a sub. We may offer internal substitution to a teacher that has the opportunity to take that time.
I Same with Niki. We will offer internal substitution if it's just an hour. However, we as well have short days, half days, a couple hours, especially in the high schools. And on Scalago, they're very clear often in the details of what those hours are. You can also pick up two different ones if they don't collide. One thing I will mention about substitute teaching is to know how you get paid. Ask the questions of how you're going to be paid. It's literally by the minute. It's by the minute. You get a couple minutes for in between classes, but you do not get paid for a spare where you're in the staff room. They may ask you, like we have this a lot in our high school, where you will come in and you've picked up, I don't know, 3 out of 5 hours or 4 out of 5 hours. There's a spare because every teacher has a spare. But the secretary may say to you, can you also do this during that your spare? So you might be able to fill in a full day and not, even though you only went in for a few hours, they may top you off. But please know that you are not paid for a spare, and to know that you're paid by the minute. So just ask the questions as well. I will say now, most of the time it's not needed anymore. But when you're going into a school for the very first time, or you happen to see a brand new secretary, you should definitely ask if you need to fill out a timesheet. Because most of our schools don't use timesheets anymore because of Scalago, but please ask if you need to fill out a timesheet.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kim. Very similar for us.
Angus,
There
we
is
can't
one.
hear you.
Oh,
I think were you saying something? We couldn't
Angus,
hear
were you
you.
speaking?
Oh, I was just asking if anybody else cares to submit a question.
I'm just going to mention, if you don't mind, the
Yeah.
question number 9 about the substitution. There's no substitution in the summer, but perhaps keep an eye out on the websites of the different school boards if they're looking for summer school teachers.
Yeah.
Because I will be very honest and say we put one up internally and I thought it would have lots of hits and it wasn't. And I think we will be able to manage, but maybe bigger school boards may need more teachers for summer school. So keep an eye on every school board's website for summer school teachers. As for substitution opportunities, the ideal time to apply is actually when you meet the criteria. So like for our school board, we take applications for substitutions all year round. But you need to meet the criteria. So once you finish, like let's say your first year this year, once you've done your first stage or your first internship, then come on board, give us a call, and we'll see how it went. But for us, I'll let Niki and Clarisse speak for themselves. But for us, we do substitution applications all year round.
Yes, Kim. We accept substitute teacher applications all year round. There's always substitute teacher posting open on Atlas for us, so on our website as well. So the way Atlas is the platform that we use for hiring. Just go onto the website, the join our team link, and then you can see all the job opportunities and apply. And we also currently there's some summer teaching opportunities that are currently open on the website. But they're pretty popular. I think we've had a lot of applications. So if you're still looking for a summer teaching position, maybe you probably have just a little bit of time to put in your applications. I believe interviews will start first week of June for that. So if you haven't and you're interested, check the website for Let's Be Pearson. We still have a couple of opportunities open. And again, the ideal time to apply for substitute teacher opportunities, like Kim said, is whenever you're eligible. So if you're, if you're in your third year and you're doing your field experience, go see your principal for emergency subbing. And if you're in your fourth year, apply directly online, and the HR will schedule you for a virtual interview on Microsoft Teams. And if you pass that interview, then we will let you know how to onboard on Scalago and open an employee file for you as well.
Thank you, Clarisse. We received a question in the chat asking if you're in a kindergarten elementary program, is it possible to substitute in a high school or a summer school? So,
Who would you like to answer that?
I'll just pop in with me. The answer is we would probably limit you to grades 7 and 8. That's where, without graduating, that's where we would probably say grade 7 and 8 and keep it at that. And for summer school, the same thing. If there's a certain subject that you would be able to teach, but we would probably not give you the ministry ones. Niki?
Perfect. Okay, so for us, once you receive your teacher substitution card, you can sub anywhere, elementary, high school, not a problem. But you would never be able to get a contract. You can get a contract only based on what your brevet d'enseignement says. So with that being said, yes, you can work as a substitute teacher, but when it comes to offering you contracts, we can only go by what's on your brevet. I hope that helps answer your question.
Definitely. Clarisse, I don't know if you wanted to share how it was done if
Mm.
it's the same thing or slightly different at Lester B.
I
Um,
think we are quite similar to Niki at the EMSB that when you're subbing, you're able to sub across the board. So even though you're elementary, you may be able to do high school. However, please note that if you're elementary, for the high school, the algorithm will rank you much lower when you're accepting substitute teaching opportunities because it goes by qualified. So somebody that's qualified for high school would always rank higher than you. So it's possible that you could do it, but you may not get as many opportunities as somebody that is qualified to teach high school at that point. And contracts would
th-
obviously be following your brevet category as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
Maybe the last question as well, Angus, the
Yeah.
TESOL one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to speak on this because I get quite a few applications from people that they're doing the ESL English as a second language program. And we do not have because we're an English school board, we do not have a very high need. Now, in our adult sector, there may be some opportunity. I do know our adult education centers, they sometimes require English as a second language teacher, and sometimes maybe some of the VOC programs as well may need somebody to teach ESL from time to time. But in general, ESL is not a high priority. We don't have really a need for it. And so when I'm recruiting, if you're ESO, you probably get an email from me saying if there was an adult center that was looking for an ESL teacher, I would forward your CV to them. But otherwise, I will let you know that again, we don't have a high need for ESL at this point, and if it changes, I will let you know. However, if let's say you did a master's and it's in English as a second language, but you have a bachelor's in English literature, that is a situation where we would let you probably be able to teach English, probably English language arts of the sort, because you have a bachelor's in English before. So generally, that has been the only exception that we have found. It will be subject to the approval of the Assistant Director for Human Resources. I would refer that to her, but in the past, we've had people who had a previous bachelor's degree in a teachable subject, and they were able, even though their B.Ed was in ESL, they were able to teach in another category because they have a previous bachelor's in that category area. So that's probably the only exception.
And if I can second that, exactly what Clarisse said, it applies to the EMSB definitely as well. I would suggest that, people that are in the teaching English as a second language program perhaps think about, reaching out to the French service centers. That would be their best bet.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you. Um, so now so we're pretty much at the end. Guys, you can still submit some questions, and I'm going to we have some other questions here as well. So, but I think, yeah, I don't know if there's any questions here. I'll just because we've taken a decent amount of time, so I'm going to let Clarisse, Niki, Kim, if you guys have any of these ones that you would like to kind of speak to before we end out. And as always, guys, if you have any other questions, you can raise your hand or you can put them in the chat. And at the end, I'll also turn off the recording. So if you want to ask outright, if you're not comfortable being in the recording on YouTube, you can also ask. You can also turn on your microphone, turn on your camera, and ask them.
Sure. Well, what I suggest to everyone is apply to all of the school boards. If you have a substitution card with EMSB, by all means, go ahead, get one with a New Frontiers and Lester B. Pearson School Board and the other school boards as well. My advice is get a sub card everywhere, and whoever offers you the contract first, well, then maybe that's where you land. So yes, absolutely, apply everywhere. I'm not
Yeah.
quite sure if there's any
Uh,
other questions there that you want me
I
to
think
answer,
that
but I think we
responds a
covered
bit.
pretty much quite a bit today. So,
Yeah.
but if anybody has any other
And I,
questions following the event, they're more than welcome to send us their questions as well directly.
Yeah, and I think also that, is it possible to work in multiple school boards? That it kind of responds a little bit to question number 7, right? How do I ensure I work enough days to make a livable income? Because if you apply to multiple school boards, you're increasing the amount of opportunities you'll be contacted for. I am curious, how much notice do you guys typically give for a substitute teaching opportunity?
For us,
I imagine it varies
it
quite
could
a
be in
bit.
advance or it could be the day before. It really depends on the situation. Sometimes there's emergency situations, so that's a really difficult one to answer, to be quite frank with you.
Yeah.
And we are very much the same. We
Yeah.
you may end up at you may end up getting a notification on Scalago for a month from now, because some teachers know when they have appointments, and then other stuff are like, they it's the same morning when somebody's child is unwell. So we have it all over the place, like all over the place.
Great. Thank you. I think that's pretty much everything. I'm going to stop the
Um,
recording, just
Angus,
so that if anybody,
can I
yeah.
point out
Oh, yeah,
just
sorry.
just question 3 as well, whether they can work in multiple school boards and how to affect your seniority. So your seniority does not transfer from one board to the other, but your in terms of your salary scale, your experience, your years of experience would, in terms of where we place you on the salary scale, but your seniority would not transfer from one board to the other. And we talk about seniority not necessarily when you're subbing, but when you have a contract. That's when seniority comes into place, right? So, but your years of experience, even with substitution, would count towards placing you on the salary scale, or if you do get a contract.
Thank you. Thank you. Great point. Great point. Thank you. So I'm going to stop the recording now in case anybody wants to turn off their microphone and camera and ask some questions. But before I do, just thank you. Thank you so much, Niki, Kim, Clarisse, for joining us. Um, And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to all of you students who joined us today as well. The question about where will we access the recording? It'll be on YouTube. So I'll put a link to our YouTube channel in the chat room, but also I'll send out an email I'll send out an email once it's available. I'm just gonna stop the recording now. Stop recording.